So today we're going to be taking a look at how to use the pen tool in Adobe Photoshop. It is similar to Adobe Illustrator, but with a few different variations that you have to understand with the shortcut keys and using your keyboard. If you haven't used Adobe Illustrator before, learning the basics in Photoshop is a good, useful option. Just understand that it can be frustrating if you don't have the proper instruction to start with. So to begin with, we're going to be taking a look at how we can draw out these shapes that are now presented in blue. I'm going to first look to select out my pen tool over in the left side navigation. To select out the pen tool, it is located right above the type tool, the capital T icon, and we see the pen tip shape, in which Adobe gives an example of how clicking and dragging you can create curves within a line, as well as creating out a straight line as well. So again, just click and drag to create out curves. It will create out an additional curve that you can end and alter, but we'll get into breaking that down in a few moments. With the pen tool selected, I'm going to take a look at my top navigation. At my top navigation, we are working on a Mac, but if in a PC, it is the same layout overall. I want to look to actually select out shape. With shape, it will change the settings so I can change my fill, my stroke, and change out overall selections. If I'm selected on path and I start to draw out a shape, and I connect back to where I started, this path I can make a selection and it will actually show the dotted lines in which the area that I selected. But I'm going to deselect, Command D on a Mac, Control D on a PC, and I'm going to switch over to the shape. With the shape, I'm going to do some settings changes. You may have a default color appearing. If I click on the fill section, I'm going to make sure to click on the none. Or if you do see a color inside the area, again, just click on the actual box and I can click on none or no color with this red diagonal line. For the stroke, I'm going to just make sure that I don't have this light blue color that I'm using for my actual shapes I'm going to be tracing. So I'm going to just switch this over to black so it's more visible. I'm going to raise up my size of the stroke weight to 5 pixels. With 5 pixels, it will be bold enough to stand out. Any alterations or variations that I may need to change, right now I'm going to leave my stroke options with a solid line. I can leave the alignment, the corners, and the caps all the same. But we're going to look to draw out these shapes individually. Before I do start drawing out, I'm going to zoom in on our kite shape or diamond shape at the top left. I can either hit Command or Control plus sign, zooming in. If I want to scroll to an area, I can use my wheel on my mouse, up and down with the wheel on the mouse, or if I hold down Command or Control, I can adjust left to right. So the important part of understanding with the pen tool, it will create out its own separate layers. Over on the layers panel right now, I currently have only the background layer. But when I start to draw out, you'll notice that in the layers panel, it creates the shape 1. Just because I clicked a point, now I'm going to look to move over to the top of my diamond shape, and it'll automatically create a line that's going to sit in between the 2 points. If I want to really make sure that my line sticks out, I can raise up my pixels, and just for argument's sake and making sure that it is visible, I'm going to raise this up to 15 pixels. So it's a little bit more visible, and you see that it changes right with the actual change that I'm making. So I'm going to continue down over to the next point, and understand with straight lines, it's just a matter of clicking point by point to draw out a shape. You do not need to go into small anchor points trying to draw a straight line. Think about the most simple variation that you can create, just a matter of clicking, and it automatically connects from point to point. If I ever mess up at any point, I can always hit Command or Control Z to undo. Or if I want to step forward, Command or Control plus Shift and Z will allow me to step forward. But I want to get back to where I started, and you'll see that my cursor will actually appear a little circle that means that we're going to enclose the object, connect it back to the beginning point. So when I click, it ultimately closes up the shape. I can hit escape just to be safe, and this allows me to know that I can continue on to my next shape. So if I scroll over, I created this zigzag shape, and midway into the zigzag, you see that it starts to curve. We want to understand the difference between a straight line and a curved line. So to draw out the straight line, I'm going to start at the beginning left point. I'm going to move to the top, just click point by point. But when I get midway, rather than simply clicking, we're going to look to click and drag. With the drag, not letting go of the mouse, it actually permits me to be able to see the curve bend into the position that I'm looking for. So if I move my cursor to the right, you see how the line will bend to the left. If I move my cursor to the left, the line will bend right. So it will go the opposite direction that you're pulling with what is known as the handle on the line tool. So if I click and drag my cursor upward, it will bend the line downward. Or if I bend it downward, you see it go upward. But we're just looking for a subtle match to the line that was already created. So I can click and drag. I'm moving it up and to the left. You can see where my cursor is sitting. And when I'm satisfied with the line, I just release with my mouse, and that line is automatically created. Now, the important part of understanding how to work with these curved lines is that we have the anchor point in the middle that we just created. And from this anchor point, we actually have what are known as handles, these lines that extend from the anchor point that we created. The problem is that if I continue and go over to a new area, I click, the handles are automatically going to create out a curve that I don't necessarily want. So if I want to undo, just hit Command Z or Control Z to undo. But again, if I go over to left or right side, you'll see that the handles are automatically creating a curve. I want to end this. I don't want to have the curve. I want to create out my own new line. So I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC. I click on the anchor point that I've just created, and you see that it actually cuts off the lead handle that was pointing upward. Again, if I ever mess up, I can just always hit Command or Control Z. But again, if I see this handle extending and I want to cut it off so I can go down towards this bottom edge, I have to hold down Option or Alt, click on the anchor point, and now I can move down to the bottom point. So I'm going to click and drag, and as I drag, I'm going to just do my best to match to the curve of the shape. And when I'm satisfied with the area, just release. And you can see that it will actually sharpen out the corners. You can always adjust how we want the corners to be presented on the drop down at the top navigation. If I see corners, I can switch it over to a rounded corner, and you see that it rounds out the corners of these objects. Or I can put it back on the sharp corners, and again, I get those sharp edges happening on my shape. But again, we can see this handle being extending from our anchor point. Again, I want to hold down Option or Alt, click on the anchor point, and then move over to my next point. I can click and drag, match it as best possible, release. Again, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, click on the anchor point, and then click and drag to come up with my final curve. So you can see I did pretty well of recognizing any of the shapes. If I feel like something can be altered, I can look at my direct selection tool, the white arrow. If you're not seeing, the direct selection tool is located in the same section as the path selection tool. Path selection tool will move out entire object, whereas the direct selection tool will allow us to move up anchor points. So with the direct selection tool, I can go over to the anchor point right in the middle here. I can click and drag it, adjust it to the correct placement if I just want to modify or clean up any areas. But again, I'm going to hit escape on my keyboard to end the line. And you see it kind of deselects the object. And now we can go over to our crescent moon shape. With the crescent moon shape, you have to understand that the crescent moon is not just necessarily going to be working from corner to corner. We actually want to create some anchor points in between parts of the object. To do this, I'm going to look to start on the bottom left side of the crescent moon. I'm going to click a point on that corner. And instead of going all the way up, trying to drag it out, you'll see that I can't necessarily get the bend properly right around the sides of the inside of the crescent moon. So instead, I want to hit Command Z, and this time I'm going to go to the middle of this curve. I'm going to click and drag to get a more accurate match to the crescent moon shape. Again, I'm going to look to do the same on the top. If I feel like it's not necessarily matching perfectly, I can always click and drag to match up the curve as best possible. You can see I'm slightly adjusting and handles are created from this. I release, and we get that match to the shape. You can also, again, just follow the process that we did previously from the curved line zigzag. If I want to cut off these anchor points, I can hold down Alt or Option, click on that middle anchor point that I just made, and then go up to the top and click and drag, creating out my own curve. Once I get to the corner, again, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, click on the anchor point, and with this, I can change the direction so that the curve can now go down the back side of the crescent moon. For anchor points on the back side of the crescent moon, again, it is going to be too difficult to go all the way around the back side of the shape. So we're going to look to put in a couple of different anchor points just to make sure that we're getting as accurate as possible. So in my mind, I like to break it down into thirds. If I think of this one full line, I'm going to go about a third of the way down, look to click and drag, creating out my own curve. I can hold down Alt or Option to end that anchor point, cut off the handle, and then going down to this about 2/3, I'm going to again click and drag to create out and match that curve as best possible. Finally, again, just cutting off the anchor point, I can go back to the beginning, and you'll see a little circle appear again, looking to close up the object. I click and drag outward, and we close up that shape. I can always go back if I want to. Remember the direct selection tool. I click on an anchor point, click and adjust it slightly to make sure that I match the shape as best possible. If I need to undo, step back, I can always hit Command or Control Z. But I want to make sure that I have the layer selected. And with the pen tool, I can go over to the corner and look to finish out the shape and closing the object, making sure that we have the full crescent moon shape. Again, I'm going to hit Escape, just end the line, make sure I can move on to my selection. And before we get into the ghost, we're actually going to start with the bat. The bat is a little bit simpler overall. And just because it has sharp corners. We look at the ghost, it is the more complicated because it has curved edges and no sharp corners. So again, we're going over to the pen tool. And I'm going to start at the wing of the bat. I click a point, and this time I'm going to go down to the left. If I click and drag and create out the curve shape, hold down Alt or Option, click a point, move down to the next point. Click and drag just to match these curves. So all I'm going to do is hold down Alt or Option, click and drag, matching the curve as best possible, cutting off the handle that extends from the anchor point, and you want to follow all the way around. Where it will change is up between the wing and the head. We'll have to add in an anchor point because the curve is so long. Again, so when I get up to the wing at the top, if I don't feel like it's accurate, I can always hit Command or Control Z. But I'm going to click and drag to create out the curve for the top portion of the wing. Once I have it where I want it, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, cut off the handle. This time, rather than going up to the ear of the bat, I'm going to go about midway in between the wing and the head. Click and drag. And I can look to see if the handle will match the curve properly. So if I go to the top of the ear, I can see that it does match pretty well overall. So I can leave this, getting me the perfect curve. Again, cutting off the handle so I can create out my own new curve for the top of the head. Cut off the handle. Then we're going up to, or in between the two curved lines. And then back to where we started, where we see this little circle appear, closing up the object. And understand the reason why we can use the pen tool and make sure that we have a closed shape. If I go to the top navigation, I can see my fill. I can see what happens if I do add a color inside of the area. So if I wanted to fill this in with a purple or pink color, you see that it actually fills in the entire space enclosed in the object of the black lines that we created. I can always switch back to none as well. Now we can take a look at the ghost. With the ghost, we want to look to draw the outside first. And I want to keep this in as simple and little as anchor points as possible. So back with the pen tool, I'm going to start down on the bottom left side. And what I want to do is recognize the different curves that make up the shape. There's a curve that bends upward, then it switches directions. So that's where I want to really start and add an anchor point. At the top, yes, it can go all the way around, but the tricky part is that it may cut corners. It may cut into the angle, and we may not get the angle that we're looking for. So rather than trying to go all the way to the right side, we may want to put an anchor at the top. So I'm going to start it again on the bottom left. I'm going to click a point, and I'm going to see where this curve starts to go up. And when it starts to end or starts to change direction, that's where I want to add in an anchor point. So I can click and drag downward, or upward, excuse me. And we see that black line appear. Then I can go to the top of the head and see if it can create the curve that I'm looking for. If I like it, you can use it as is. Or again, we can hold down Alt or Option, cut off the handle of the anchor point, and create our own curve to match perfectly. But again, we want to look to repeat and have the same placement for these anchors on the left side of the ghost. So over on the right, I'm going to click and I can release. Now I want to go down to the bottom right side, click and drag to create a curve that matches very similar as on the right side of the body. So unlike what we saw with the crescent moon, the diamond shape, or the bat, the ghost does not have any sharp corners. Instead, we are going to create out rounded corners on each of the zigzags of the bottom piece. So rather than going to the corners to create these curves, we're going to go to where the straight lines are in between the actual zigzag. So as it starts to straighten out and go up, I'm going to click point. Remember, again, I can always hit Command or Control Z. I'm actually going to cut off the handle first. And over on the left side, I'm going to click and drag to create out the curve where it matches to the shape as best possible. Again, I'm going to cut off the handle, hold down Alt or Option. Then now I'm going to move to the middle of the straight line going downward. Click and drag to create the curve. Alt or Option, click and drag to create out your new curve. And you can always see if it will match the curve to where you want, but if it's not perfect, just go ahead and cut off the curve and create out your own. So again, Alt or Option, click a point, move over to the straight area, click and drag to create out the curve. Keep repeating this process until we get over to the left side. Alt or Option. Again, if the curve is not matching to the shape, just hit Command or Control Z. Alt or Option, cut off the handle. Click and drag, creating out the curve. Now I want to get back to where I started. Matching the curve as best possible, we get the shape of the ghost. I'm going to now zoom in closer to the mouth and eyes. These are very small areas that we want to focus on. When it comes into the oval shape of the eyes, we want to break this down into 4 points, just as a circle technically has 4 points within the curved edge. I'm going to go to the left side, the right side, the top, and the bottom. So I'm going to start over on the left, click a point, and then move right up to the top. I can click and drag to create out that matching curve. And again, I can hold down Alt, cut off the handle, and then move over to the right side. Click and drag, matching it best to the shape. Again, just repeat this process all the way around the shape. Cut off the handle of the anchor, and then connect back to where we started. If you do get a stray line that shows the sharp edge, the reason being is just because we're working in a very small area, the stroke is not able to recognize the size of the object. So we can clean this up by taking a look at the top navigation. I have the object currently selected, and where we see on the drop down for my stroke options, I'm going to change corners to rounded corners. And it'll automatically cut off that sharp edge that is created, making sure that it matches and creates a smooth edge all around. We'll repeat the same process over on the other eye. Click and drag. Hold down Alt or Option, cut off the handle. We're just going point by point, matching as accurately as possible. And again, you can see that I do have the corners rounded. If I were to put this on a sharp edge, you can see that I actually did do this well, where we're not seeing extended straight edges coming off the shape. Sometimes it's just a matter of a slight angle can make that sharp edge that is unwanted. And finally, for the mouth, same process. I'm going to go towards the top navigation, or top of the mouth shape, creating out the curve, and then over to the right, and matches well to the shape. If I wanted to, again, make sure it's accurate as possible, I can add in a couple anchor points around the corner. Again, I'll hold down Alt or Option, click and drag to create out its own curve. Then over to the other side, Alt or Option, click and drag, and then finally go back where we started. Again, we can fill those in as we want. I'll fill them in a little bit later. But we'll finally take a look at the pumpkin. When it comes into the pumpkin shape, we want to look to break this down, focusing on drawing the outside of the pumpkin shape and then drawing the lines inside of the object. So the outside will be the frame in which we can place the color. So I'm going to start with the pen tool. And with the pen tool, I'm going to start where the stem and the side of the left side of the pumpkin meet. I'm going to click a point, click and drag to create out that curve, matching as best possible. I can hold down Alt or Option, cut off the handle. I'm going to go over to the side of the pumpkin, just make sure that this is accurate as possible. And I can look to see if the curve is created perfectly. If it's not, just hit Command Z, hold down Alt or Option, and then create out the curve that you are trying to match. Again, Alt or Option. This time I can go to the bottom, click and drag to create out that curve. And again, I can kind of follow the same sequence over on the right side. Hold down Alt or Option, cut off the handle, click and drag, create out the curve. Make sure that you're not holding down Alt as you're clicking and dragging. But we want to look to hold down Alt when we cut off the anchor point. And I'm actually going to go down below the stem and just focus on the main area in which the pumpkin is made. And click and drag to close up the object. For the lines on the inside, again, we'll just hit Escape so that we can start fresh with new lines. But if I were looking to fill in my shape 9, which is this outline of the pumpkin, the reason why we do this is just so we can see that we do have the object enclosed. It will fill in with a color. We're going to make sure that this is left on no color for right now because we want to draw out the lines that are going to sit over top of it. And to create out some lines, I'm going to click on the pen tool, click and drag to create out curves for these lines. I can hit Escape, and then I'm going to look to build out new lines that I can extend over the other blue lines that I'm currently seeing. Click and drag, create out the curve. Again, if it doesn't match precisely, Alt or Option, cut off the handle, then click and drag to create out your own curve. Again, hit Escape. We can start from the bottom or top of these curved lines. But I'm just looking to match as best possible. So if I want to again start at the bottom, click and drag. And here it is okay if you do end up running into or connecting to another curved line, as long as it's not the outer shape. We get back to where we started, drawing out all the lines. Now, if I were to select on the outside edge, I'm going to click on the Move tool, first tool, left side navigation, and click on the outer edge of where I originally had my shape 9, which is the outside pumpkin. And again, this will, to select this layer, but I'm going to go to the pen tool to look to change the fill color. And if I were to put orange inside, you now see how the black lines are sitting over top of the actual pumpkin layer. The final step is adding in this stem. With the stem, again, I'm going to go over to the pen tool. With the pen tool, I'm going to get rid of the fill. And the reason why it disappeared on the pumpkin is just a matter of layer 9 was selected. If we want to switch out of the layer, we can always look to draw out our own layers or start drawing your own new layer, which I'm going to look to fill out the outside of the stem shape. Again, hold down Alt or Option to cut off the handle so that you can change direction. And then back to where we started. So we have the full area drawn out. I can look to fill this in. So if I change my fill color, I get a brown color inside. And again, I can hit escape so that I don't have that layer selected. I can look to draw out the top portion, give myself that line to divide out the shape. But when I now go back over to layer 9, which I know is my pumpkin shape, or just go over to the Move tool, click on the outer line edge, I can change out my fill again, filling in with the orange color. So we zoom out, we have all the shapes drawn out. Now it's just a matter of, we can look to make sure that all the lines and objects are enclosed. So if I go over, click on the outer line of the bat, I can check over in the layers panel and make sure that this is the correct layer. I'm going to again go over to the pen tool, change out my fill. I can use the color picker in the top left. If I just want to go like a light lavender pinkish color, fills into that area. If I want to put a color for the inside of the ghost, again with the Move tool, I automatically click on the outer edge. Just make sure that you have auto select on at the top left side navigation. I can then go over to the pen tool and use the color picker to pick out a color that works for my design. I'll go just a light color, and you see that the eyes and mouth do sit in front. It's because we drew them after. If you are seeing those layers, or if they disappear on you, it's just a matter of making sure that you maintain or control all your layers. And you can keep organization within my layers. If I have layer 5 through 8 being part of my ghost, I can hold down Command or Control, select out all the layers that make up my ghost, and click on the folder icon, where I can create a new group. I can rename this ghost. So I know that the ghost has shape 5, 6, and 7, and 8. But if I want to fill in these shapes for 5, 6, or for 6, 7, and 8, I'm going to go back to the pen tool. I have layer shape 6 selected. I'm just going to fill in the eyes so that they're filled with black. I'm going to do this actually for both shape 7 and 8. Again, just looking to change the fill. Because I have layer 7 and 8 selected in the layers panel at the same time, I can click on the black and it fills into that space. Finally, I can do this for the kite or diamond shape. Back over to the pen tool. Pick whatever color you prefer for your design. And finally, the crescent moon. We don't need to do for the zigzag as it is not an enclosed object. Back over the pen tool. I'll do a light blue for this. And we see it now filled in. So it is a good practice to follow along step by step, looking to draw out each of the shapes. Please feel free to review and go back through this video as much needed, or check out any of my other videos, or hit subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a great day.